Hey everybody, welcome back to the Preacher Boys podcast. Today on the show, I am joined once again by my friend Amy Nordhues. I had her on the show back in December of 2021. She had just released her book, Preyed Upon, which tells her experience being groomed and abused by a therapist. And ever since the episode dropped, she has continued doing incredible advocacy work, supporting survivors who have experienced abuse at the hands of therapists, and just continues educating people over on her social platforms and on her website, amynordhues.com. And she's joining me on the show today along with Jennifer Kramer. The two of them are producing a documentary series about this called #Therapy2, which they hope will become a 7-part documentary series discussing some of the horrific abuses that have gone on within this industry. And we have a really great conversation in today's episode. We talk a little bit about how being abused in this type of setting affects you when you are abused by a therapist. I mean, what are you supposed to do to heal? It's not something where you want to immediately jump into a therapy setting again. We talk about how widespread this is. I mean, Amy shares some really disturbing statistics about just how many cases like this there are every single year. And then as we get closer to the end of the episode, we talk about this documentary series and what their goal is in releasing it, where they're at in the process right now, and how people can support this project. If you're interested in doing that, you can head over to amynordhues.com. That's Amy, Nordhues.com. She has a link that talks to you all about the documentary series, and it has the incredible poster artwork, which you should definitely check out right now. This conversation was absolutely fantastic, and I know you're going to get a lot out of it. I know I certainly did. And again, be sure to go support this documentary series if possible. So if you want to go follow the social accounts, I'm sure there'll be some behind the scenes and some more footage up there really soon. But that's enough from me for now. Let's go ahead and get into my conversation with Amy Nordhues and her co-producer, Jennifer Kramer. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Amy and Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat. And Amy, I was looking and told you before we hit record, I think it's been like 3 years since you were on the show. And I mean, I still vividly remember reading through your book, hearing your story for the first time. And, you know, I've read a lot of books that relate to like the psychology of these situations or the way these cases happen. But, you know, every time I talk about your book, I say it's one of the best, you know, anecdotal experiences of grooming that I've ever read. And that book, of course, is Preyed Upon, which I still have the old cover. I need to update to the new one. But yeah, for anybody who listened to that interview, what has happened in the years since we had that conversation? It's been a minute.
Yes, and thank you, first of all. I still remember our interview too. It was one of my favorites. I had a website that I kind of just set up for my book, but then I really started writing for it just to put information out there because there just isn't that much out there. And then I just started getting contacted more and more frequently by survivors. So here in the past year, I thought maybe I wanted to start some sort of peer support group, but I didn't, I'm not a licensed professional, but just a way to bring survivors together. So I started an online book club, and it was originally just going to be my book, and survivors would get on and we would discuss it. And then I found 3 other authors. 2 are therapy harm and 1 is clergy abuse. And so we did 4 authors, 4 books, and we would just get on a Zoom, and it was really healing, and it seemed to really benefit people. Right before that book club, Jennifer was one of the survivors that reached out to me, and we started communicating. And then in the book club is another actress out of New York, and I thought, that's just really odd that I'm now connected with 2 survivors in the film industry. We should do a documentary. We should do something with this. And that's kind of where that started. And so it's now just Jennifer and I, but we have been working for, I don't know, at least the past 6 months, full time almost, towards a documentary. So that's kind of where I am now. Yeah, just still trying to get the word out there.
And Jennifer, you mentioned before we hit record as well that it was actually probably our interview together that you watched that introduced you to Amy. Was it similarities to your own experience that resonated? Was it just the story in general? Like what drew you to Amy's story in particular?
Well, I had had my own experiences that were horrific in therapy. And for me, I was not one of those people that would reach out to like the therapy exploitation link line. My whole career trajectory was something that was going to be more public. And also I still have so much shame and confusion about what happened to me. I was just kind of living with it alone. I mean, my family knew what had happened to me, but I was still suffering a lot. And I wasn't actively looking for anything on therapy harm, but somehow I on YouTube, I found Amy. And it was not only her delivery, it was, of course, her story, because survivors have a lot of similarities in the traumas and the experiences that they go through, which is so amazing to me. I think it was the way she told her story, the clarity, and just the feeling that I got from her. And so I remember going to my mother and saying, God, I saw this woman, um, doing these interviews, and she's just amazing. It's like listening to myself. I almost get emotional talking about it because I was suffering, and my mother kept saying, "Well, just reach out to her, reach out to her." And so I thought about it for weeks. I had never talked about my experience with anybody, but I finally worked up the courage, and I did. And many years before this, before I had the worst of my therapy experience, the worst therapy harm part of my experience, I was never going to talk about, is it being me, that I had this experience, because I was so full of shame and confusion and blame for it. But there was another time that I tried to work with this journalist to do something, a documentary, but it just fizzled out I believe because it wasn't Amy. It was just somebody that I think thought that I could bring all the money and everything to the table. So it never went anywhere. And, so it sort of feels amazing and meant to be that I met Amy, and that we're doing this to help people, to give survivors a voice.
I mean, obviously, you've been spending a couple months digging into this, and I'm sure talking to tons of people who've had similar experiences. How widespread are these types of stories, and how many people have you encountered? And I have to imagine everybody's experience is identical, where it's like, I have to be the only one this has happened to in the beginning, and then quickly realizing they're not. Like, can you give me a sense of the scale of therapist abuse and how widespread it actually is?
Well, I know Therapy Exploitation Link Line will tell you that they hear from 40 to 50,000 therapist and clergy abuse survivors every year. And these are typically adults. They've also let us know that they find male and female therapists abusing at a similar rate. This is not a male therapist, female client problem.
Okay.
I know. I personally, I couldn't say in the hundreds for sure. And, I don't even have a big reach. It's not, I have a few articles online. It's not particularly easy to find me. I do have the book, but just for this documentary alone, we interviewed at least 50 survivors. And those are just survivors that are willing to come forward with their story. So many would like to, but they're in the middle of a legal process and that scares them. And some are out of the country and we're sticking to the US. So there's a lot of us out there.
I think there's also a lot of people like me who are just going to take it to their grave. I mean, that's basically
Right.
was my feeling. I'm going to my grave with this. There's no way that, anybody would not think I was crazy if this is what my story was.
Sure.
Or not understand it. It's just, so I think there's many people we don't even know. They're just kind of living in silence over it.
Yeah. Well, I have
And
to
keep
imagine.
in mind, if we don't come together, a lot of us take it to the grave because we think we're at least partially to blame, maybe fully to blame. We don't even, some don't even recognize they were abused.
Right. Well, you mentioned the word crazy, and like that's a common fear with any abuse scenario is like, am I going to be taken seriously? Do I look like the crazy one? And when you're dealing with someone who's quite literally capable of handing out that label, it that's got to
Yes.
be a scary layer of control on top of this. I do want to get clarity really quick. You mentioned 40 to 50,000. Is this all is that all sexual abuse? Is that just any form of abuse between a therapist, financial,
Correct.
emotional? Okay. And you mentioned that both male and female abuse at a similar rate, which is really interesting. Do you have any inkling as to why that is? Because in almost every other category, I mean, it skews primarily male. Is there any reason for that?
I can speak to that. Do you want to speak to it, Jennifer?
No, I was just going to say about the types of abuse. No, it isn't just sexual. I think that's the one that's most talked about. It's the one I think within the ethics code that is very black and white. That is a crime. Beyond that, something that is very important to me to explore within this documentary series is the other types of abuse. It can still be sexual and be innuendo, which was in my case. It can be purely emotional and not sexual. It's all so harmful, and I feel like the more emotional type is less understood, and it's more nuanced, and it's just something that people don't readily think is as bad as it is, and that's one thing that I really want to educate the public about. And all my abusers were women, so
Wow.
I that's another part of it. You just don't. It's hard. It was hard for me to, within my own story, to come to terms with. Well, I was right now blamed, but seeing this person as a predator, I still have a heart, because it was a woman and an older woman. So, and mine's a long, complicated story, but so all those nuances are extremely important. I hope that we can really educate people about it.
And Amy, I know you wanted to mention something on that as well.
Just on the handful of books, memoir books on this topic, there's more female abusive therapists than male. And I have an article on my website where I kind of see two different categories of abusers. And there's the sexual predator, which we all think of right away. And then there's the savior, the narcissistic savior. And I think that is why there are so many women. And I think some of them, I think the evil scale varies. Like some of them are just getting their needs met. Some of them are looking for daughters and sons. Others just want to be needed. Others want to feel special and cherished. Any way you look at it, they're using clients to meet their emotional needs.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does cross over into the physical and sexual. But I guess that's to answer your question, why I feel like it's just as much a female therapist problem.
Yeah. I want to get into like the actual process of covering these stories, but I wanted to ask two more questions relating to this. One of them that comes to mind is, a therapist is a medical professional, and they're dealing obviously with the mental side, but it's got to be similar to a doctor where, they're thinking of things on a higher level than you are. When a doctor says take this, you can read the label or you can think that, I kind of understand what's happening, but I have to trust their judgment. And I think a lot of times what leaves you open to abuse in a counseling or therapy, scenario is you're deferring to their expertise. So what may feel uncomfortable may just be, I don't understand this. I don't know what the process is. First and foremost, how does someone even notice that something is wrong in that setting? Because I have to imagine I know therapy in general is uncomfortable. The first time you ever do it, it's a very uncomfortable experience. How does someone delineate between I'm uncomfortable versus like there's some really serious red flags here that I should take seriously and, exit the situation, report it, so on and so forth?
Wow, it's a complex.
I was going to say
There could
that
be a
is
documentary on this topic
I
that
was
would
going to say we
flesh
need a
this out.
documentary on this topic. That is that is a tough one because as we notice little red flags, first of all, they start small and build. And first of all, the abuser waits till we settle with one before they move on to another. And then you forget that and you think that wasn't really a big deal. But then the other problem is like when I started to get enough red flags where I felt like I should run this by somebody else. If you do choose to share with somebody and they minimize it, don't believe you, blame you, take the abuser's side, you usually shut down and go back to this source of support that you're unsure of. And so I always like to tell people you have to keep telling until you're heard because, I had another friend that said, had you told me any of that, I would have never let you go back. So I feel like without an outside voice, it is really hard because you're just isolated in this little bubble with you and the abuser, and they have you so confused. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but that is something that is important. I feel like when we're starting to get in dangerous relationships, abusive relationships, the outside world gets less and less of our attention and the abuser gets more and more of it. And I feel like that in itself is a red flag. If your circle is that small, you might be in trouble.
Well, I think every story is so unique. And so, from like my situation, I'm going to speak specifically about my worst experience because by the time I got to this person, when I was young, I had already been in a very unethical therapy situation. And it led to a lawsuit, which I easily won. And then that therapist ended up dying. And so I had a lot of, and you're always very attached to these people, so later, and this therapist that was the most traumatic for me knew that I had that experience. She knew that I had sued a previous therapist, and yet, and I was, I do feel like my life and things in my life and that experience all did contribute to my situation in that therapy, because when this therapist started to break boundaries again and pray, and started to basically love bomb me and say, you're my favorite client and everything that she did because I had a previous experience, I thought this person could not possibly be lying to me. Okay, that's what I was trying to get at, that because I already been through something like this, that I couldn't comprehend that this person could be that evil or that frankly stupid. I mean, I just, even to this day, that's why I have such a hard time getting over that therapy, because I just can't comprehend how this person could do that and repeat it. So I took it from my perspective as not a red flag, but as, oh my God, she really means this. This is really true. I really am the favorite. I really am loved as much as her family. I really am, all these things because of this previous experience. So I think every situation is unique. And so red flags come in all different types. But I didn't see that as a red flag. I took it as more true than anything could ever be because of my history that she knew about. And I think that's part of why I had such a hard time still to this day getting over it, because I can't make sense of that. So
Yeah, this comes up all the time. This is one of the most frustrating things is like, again, no matter how much, even when we've experienced things before, we always default to thinking if we wouldn't be capable of doing this to someone,
right.
Nobody else will. And I'm proved wrong time and time again in these stories. And I hear that sentiment all the time where people leave a relationship where they put their abuser in jail and the next abuser still thinks there's an opportunity here. And it's a cycle that happens, constantly.
And also the blame, also
Right.
I was, as we all are, or many are, blamed for everything. And I think, that also makes it hard to get over when it's runs so deep. These people have such power, and they really touch you on a level, as one retired therapist said, it's sort of like a soul murder. And I really feel that that's so true.
The other problem with the red flags to me is that we all noticed at least some of them, and we all thought our situation was unique.
Right.
And so that's why this documentary to me is so important, because I feel like if I had known back then when I was in therapy that these same things happened to, I don't know, 25 other women and they were abused when they were happening, it would have given me pause. But because we're in our own, isolated little situation, we think, well, we really are special. And this really is different. Well, I have talked to hundreds of survivors. We all were told the same things. We all thought we were special, and we all thought it was unique. And so I guess my hope is that getting this out to the general public will just start to make people start to question when they find themselves in this unique situation. How unique is it really?
I know I was talking about the individual red flags, but this leads to the second question I had on that, which is within, this is a regulated industry. I'm sure that there's things you could cover where it could be regulated better, but are there guardrails in place currently to prevent abusive people from getting into these positions when it comes to reporting? For people that are listening, your visual responses are answering this question. What guardrails or lack thereof are there in this industry that keeps these people accountable? And either of you can answer, or both, if you have a response on that.
I don't know. Probably Amy is more educated with all of the, advocacy that she does on this type of a subject. What I would hope from this documentary, why we're doing it, is in an ideal world, I wish that therapists, under all different kinds of licenses, would be required to take classes on therapy abuse, and I would hope that also the documentary would enlighten therapists about the role that they play in their patients' lives and how sacred it is. For me, I feel like there's nothing. I feel like there's nothing that can really protect clients when they go into therapy. What happened to me, this person has so much power over me to falsely diagnose, which happens to many people. They got me into a hospital. They somehow manipulated me into a hospital. And I just feel that, clients are in such a vulnerable place. I don't know how you can get empowered. If you would find yourself where I found myself, which was, totally powerless, because I had so much post-traumatic stress too, that, they can use that against you too, as if it has nothing to do with them. What you're going through is pathologized as something separate from the therapist's unethical behavior. And then you find yourself in a really difficult situation. So I don't know, maybe Amy can probably speak on this much more intelligently than myself. But I would hope that, I don't know what change could be created by what we're doing on a legal or a level with the boards, but something needs to be done. I can tell you that something needs to be done.
Yeah, I had two different thoughts on that. One of them was this summer I was at a conference, and they were talking about clergy abuse, and they were talking about how the abuse is not going to stop until the people at the top are held accountable. And I started thinking about that in relationship to therapist abuse. And it's true, because coworkers and supervisors are not going to put themselves through the trauma of reporting a colleague and maybe even losing their job if there is no risk for them in not doing so. And I say that because one of the survivors in this project, she's young. She has a state that has really good laws in place, the way the board in her state operates. And they're going after not only the abusive therapists, but all of the coworkers and the supervisor of this clinic that knew and did nothing.
Yeah.
But see, that doesn't happen very often. And so that's one problem. And as far as supervision goes, that's the other thing. Supervisors are not in the therapy room. So
No,
the supervisors hear what the abusive therapist shares. So that's completely not even a help. And then the other thing is, this isn't really how can we make it better, but first you have to find the right board, and then you have to report, and it's very slow, and a lot of cases aren't even taken, and it's your word against the abusers. You know, with me, mine was a psychiatrist, so I had the medical board, and I felt like they were a little more responsive maybe than the behavioral health boards, but they told me they take just like they take a very small percentage of cases that are reported. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, it does. I mean, do you think there's like do you think there would be benefit to, like I think of in the medical world, you've got a nurse in the room with you. There's a second pair of eyes there. Do you think things like that, have those been floated as possibilities or solutions? Like, because I it's a weird thing, right? Because you think about it and it's like, it is a very intimate thing. And, it's hard enough to tell one person. The thought of having two people in a room could feel like you're being ganged up on in this kind of session. But also, like you said, it's already a he said, she said situation when there is abuse. So, I mean, is there anything like that where you go, man, if I could flip a switch right now or wave a magic wand and there's like a couple little changes made, are there little things like that that you think would make a big difference? Or would that, I mean,
I think every therapist office needs to have a little booklet, and some states do, that just tells you these are red flags.
hmm,
And this is the board that you contact if you have any concern. That would be easy to do,
yeah,
right? I mean, if you don't have anything to hide, that shouldn't be a big deal. And I've thought about the nurse thing, but the thing is, like, it would it would be nice if you could choose your own other therapist to bring into sessions.
that's a good idea.
A good therapist should not care and be able to have somebody there with you just to kind of just to kind of check things out with you. Because the thing is, my abusive psychiatrist had a partner who was in cahoots with him.
yeah,
So it would need to be somebody that you choose, not somebody the clinic chooses. But,
yeah,
I agree. I feel like a good therapist shouldn't feel threatened by another
yeah.
set of eyes if there's no ill intent. So
Yeah.
those are the only two things that come to mind.
Again, before I get into the production side, I got to ask this. For those who have experienced therapist abuse, I mean, where do you go at that point? Because I think that's one of the things that comes up doing this show is I'm often pushing people, like my listeners, like, if you haven't ever, done therapy, if you haven't ever talked through these things, if you haven't ever sought support, and then I talk to people like you, Amy, and I go, I hope nobody goes to a therapist and has a abusive experience there, and this happens across the board. Like when someone's been sexually assaulted and they go to the doctor, that can be a more traumatic experience. When I push people to go to the police, that can be a traumatic experience. Like seeking out a civil suit against an abuser is a traumatic. And so I'm curious from the both of you, when you have a therapist who's violating this trust, it's a weird abuse case to say, well, go seek out therapy and try to heal from that, because it's triggering on the surface. But then you've got all these other layers on top of it where, am I susceptible to this even more so now? Am I going to have the same experience? What do you do at that point? What do you?
Well, I hope so. I just want to say this subject is is on the top of my list that I'm passionate about, because my story had a lot to do with what happened to me after my first traumatic experience, and always getting into the wrong hands, always not qualified, didn't understand that this type of trauma it's like if you almost died in a burning building. If somebody is lighting matches around you, you're going to act differently than somebody who's never almost died in a fire. So you're not a normal patient after this has happened to you. You are in a completely different category. And when therapists don't understand that, I mean, it can be so disastrous. I don't like admitting this, but I had 3 suicide attempts related to my therapy harm. And they all came after the primary trauma from therapists who didn't know what the heck they were doing, who made mistakes as well, didn't understand how their own behavior was playing into my previous trauma, even though they knew about it. And, honestly, it was a big mess. So I feel so passionate about this subject. So if somebody has been harmed, I'd say, first of all, get with survivors. I mean, I personally will never go back to therapy ever. I'm just not a candidate for it anymore. I just am not. But I have found healing through my friendship with Amy, through meeting other survivors. And so I would encourage them to do Amy's book club, or, get into a group with survivors, which, when this first happened to me, didn't exist. There was TELL, but, there was nothing. There was no groups. So I think that what Amy has done is such a beautiful thing, that she took her trauma and has turned it around into helping others. And, she's had the presence of mind to write a book and, to really share her experience. And, so I say reach out to survivors. I would not, I personally, myself, Jennifer, cannot encourage anybody to go to therapy if they've had this. That's just me. I mean, I'm sure Amy has a different perspective, but I say get with survivors.
I completely understand Jennifer's perspective. And I found contacting other survivors hugely helpful, especially in the early days, really just knowing that I wasn't alone. But the amount of trauma that is left behind when a therapist abuses a vulnerable client in therapy is just so massive that I didn't find, well-meaning family and friends and even other survivors capable of handling that much trauma and that much pain. So for me, it was important to seek out another therapist. And although it is scary, they are out there. And I was able to do a year of EMDR therapy after my abuse, and I found that hugely helpful. And I just here recently found a therapist who is safe and ethical and is helping me tremendously. So while I know it is stressful to get back out there, I do think that it can be really hugely beneficial to do so. I also feel like finding healing in the same relationship that harmed you is a really healing and beneficial thing to do. They just need to be especially compassionate and patient to this topic. For example, before I found this lady in telehealth, I went to somebody local. I thought, oh, my friend likes her, it'll be fine. That's a big mistake. But I told her right up front, I'm a therapy harm survivor. I'm an advocate. I wrote a book. I just want you to know that. This is a small town. I don't know who knows who. And I thought it was okay. And at the second session, she told me she wasn't comfortable working with me. She was afraid to work with me. And I said naively, oh, are you worried you'll trigger me? Oh, no. No, I'm afraid. I fear for my license,
Yeah.
which was probably one of the most abusive things a subsequent therapist could say to us. I don't want to work with you, that type, the types that turn in therapists for no reason. It was just absolutely unacceptable.
I had the same situation where nobody, because I had sued a therapist, and like I said, I had this trauma, this is really about, I've never been comfortable talking about my own experience. It's just, I have so much shame attached to it, but I did have several suicide attempts. That's how bad it was for me. And because of that, and because I had sued a therapist, nobody wanted to, they treated me like I was the Black Plague. It was just absolutely awful. And then, I met a holistic psychiatrist who then found the person who hurt me the most. And she was very open in the beginning about, oh, you're so honest. Oh, you're so truthful. This is the basis for a great a great relationship, blah, blah, blah. And so I thought, and then when I went to her office, there was somebody that came out of her office that was in a wheelchair who couldn't really even speak. And I thought, wow, she can communicate with this woman. She's, well, this is just the place I'm meant to be. And I didn't know that I was in for my worst experience that I ever experienced. And it makes you more vulnerable when people don't want to work with you. It's a very cruel part of this.
And then there's Jennifer, then there's the label. When we were interviewing about 50 survivors, it almost became laughable because all of us were called borderline, delusional, or psychotic. All of us.
Yeah.
And, subsequent therapists are then judgmental because now we come with a label.
Oh, yeah.
And if this isn't made known to the general public, to therapists, how frequently their colleagues are doing this, then we're always going to be judged. Yeah. They need to understand how common this is.
Yes.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. You mentioned interviewing 50 plus people so far for this project. First and foremost, I mean, the need for the documentary is clearly there, but I'm curious the angle that you have with it and the direction that you want it to go. Is this something you view as an overview of the fact that this happens? Like that this, because most people I don't think even consider therapist abuse to be a thing. It's not something that's on most people's radar. Or is it something where you're going after, the boards and how they handle this? Are you wanting to focus on a couple individual stories? Like, what's the overall direction you're wanting to take this, as you keep moving forward on it?
Well, we considered originally a documentary feature, which is, slightly under 2 hours. But, the more we got into it, the more we realized, no, this really needs to be a series because there's so much nuance and there's so many issues to tackle around this that to, hurry up and fit it into a package of a documentary feature, we just didn't feel we could cover all the issues that we want to cover. And, it's a very bad time in the film world right now. People are having a very hard time getting financing, for even documentary features or just about everything. It's a very, very tough time in the film right now. And even some major producers are having a hard time, fully funding their documentary features. And here we are with a semi-large series of 7 episodes. We're not there yet to the point where we're being confronted of whether that's actually going to be possible if we have to lessen it down to 3 episodes. But as of now, what we designed was a 7-episode series where I personally felt, and I'm totally okay if I'm not featured as a subject in the documentary. I'm totally fine with that. I kind of see myself more as, a producer. Hopefully I can direct an episode or 2 because that's already my profession. But really supporting all the survivors to have their voice, to tell their story, and to keep a protective eye around the authenticity of what we want to do. And so that's how I see myself, as almost like the protector of the vision of what we're trying to do. And the series would start with basically Amy's story, because I feel, that Amy has created an amazing platform by taking her story and helping others. And so the human side of the documentary is following Amy through her story, how she took the trauma and turned it around for good, how she's helped all these people. And so it's a journey through her advocacy. So the first episode would be Amy and her story and writing her book. And it's going to tackle male survivors, which people don't know about. Intersectionality and harm, which is also a very interesting subject, and how, being African American or gay or transgender, how real life issues that they face can be pathologized, and how that can be also something under the category of harm. And then another episode would be reporting and retaliation and all the things that can happen. The retaliation stories of our survivors are really extreme. We want to also tackle collusion, how therapists protect themselves, protect each other And, people will not come forward and report their colleagues. And so there's a lot of, protecting of the people, the abusers. And then one of my favorite subjects, then another episode would be on therapy after harm, and how there is no education for therapists in dealing with people who have been harmed in therapy. And there should be like a special class they're required to take, or there should be education on it, because it's more common than people know, and there has to be education. And so there's an episode on that. And then we want to end it with all the survivors coming together in one place, like a reunion.
That'd be
And
super
either
cool,
doing, either doing, because it's called #therapy too, which is a little wink on the Me Too movement. And so either it would be Amy organizing this big event where, all the survivors are going to come together and everybody meets in person for the first time. Or it also could be, several survivors that are in the documentary being interviewed by somebody and going in, having a group interview type thing. So that's sort of how we've designed the series. And we really want to do a deep dive and not leave anything out.
I just wanted to say that my fear is if we're not able to go deep enough, the general public will assume that any of us that are going to counseling, we're messed up. There's something wrong with us already. And so I feel like it's like we have to prove extra, if that makes sense, or we have another hurdle to overcome.
Sure. As in like people
illness.
Watching and going, that's it? Like there's not more to this?
Yeah, like these are mentally ill people that are going to therapy and having some crazy experience.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Or it's just some, entertainment feature on these crazy
Yes.
therapists out there and these crazy things that have happened without really educating that this is like a huge epidemic.
Right.
And that's my biggest hope and concern.
Yes, to be cut short and fall short of all the facts and all the nuances and all the, everything. It's not just the abuse, it's what happens to you after. It doesn't end with the abuse. It's so many more issues.
And even just being able to explain how adults are groomed is huge, because the general public doesn't even think that can happen. They think kids can be groomed. I mean, I didn't think I could be groomed either until it happened to me. So that's something that needs to be understood, or it just leaves it open for ridicule.
So someone's listening right now, obviously you're doing a ton of pre-production right now. Is there a way people can support it? Is there a way they can voice like interest in it? So that way when you're going and pitching, you've got some ammunition behind you. Like if someone's listening right now and goes, well, obviously we need this, this is something that's important. What's the best thing someone can do to help move this thing along?
Well, if you could list my website, that would be amazing, because on my website, there's a documentary tab. And in that section is a link to a fundraising page, and also a link to a Google form where they can just fill out and say, I'm interested. This is who I am. This is a brief history of my experience. I would like to take part. Okay. So that would probably be the best. There's also a Facebook page.
That website for someone listening is amynordhues.com. I'll link to it in the show notes as well, but it's Amy, NRDHUES.com. I just want to make sure I say that in case people never go to the show notes. So I'll just say it there. So that way someone can go check that out. And you mentioned there's a Facebook page as well.
There's a Facebook page. And if they could like that and follow it, that would be hugely helpful.
Is that yours as well? Or is it named #therapy too?
It's #therapy2 docuseries.
I'm going to go like that right now because I don't think I am. So
thank you. We've been posting a lot of survivor videos there and education. And so it's not just following the page. There's a lot of good stuff on there if you are a survivor.
I love the poster artwork, by the way. I know I mentioned it when you shared it on your personal page, but I just saw it again. So I'll throw it out. If you're listening to this, I'm not even going to show you here. Just go over and like the page and you can see it for yourself. Jennifer, I feel like I interrupted you. Did you have something that you were going to add to that?
Just, it's obviously we need financial support. We don't know where this is going to go. Right now we are shooting a teaser in Los Angeles on October 13th. We need financial support to keep this cause. I feel like it's a very important cause to give survivors a voice and to educate the public about the risks, and also to teach people what proper therapy looks like. And also, hopefully, my biggest dream is to enlighten therapists themselves about the sacred role they play in the role of, in the lives of their patients. But we do need financial support to keep this going, because as of right now, it's Amy and I. We've raised a little money, but not nearly enough to hopefully we will get a major producer. We do have the interest of a major producer who we can't say who it is at this point, but all the other stuff comes out of our own pocket. And so we need support that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested to see where this goes, and definitely I think it's needed. I feel like there's been so many incredible documentaries in so many industries over the past couple of years, and this feels like something that, I mean, Amy, before your book, it was something that I never would have thought to look into, and so I can't be the only one in that. The only problem is that it's something that people don't know needs money put at it. They don't know that there's a project that needs to move forward. So hopefully this helps a little bit, get some attention on it, and I'm really interested to see where this goes over the next couple of months. Thank you so much to everyone who's listened to this entire episode. If you are interested in supporting a documentary like this, be sure once again to head over to amynordhues.com and click the link that tells you a little bit more about this documentary series. Again, there's some incredible poster art, some clips already present there that you can check out, and there's also opportunities to support this important and timely project. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I will see you next week on the Preacher Boys podcast.